great to be here, everybody. What an amazing run of talks we've had today, so I'm excited to be opening the last session. This is a paper that I actually gave at the Women's History Scotland conference last year, but there weren't that many people there who study music, and so I thought actually this audience, I might learn a lot because this is something I'm actively researching and writing about for my PhD. So I'll be very interested to hear if anyone has any secondary reading suggestions or anything I might have overlooked. My PhD research is about the role of music in the lives of herring gutters. Now some of you will have heard me talk about this before, but in case you're not familiar with the herring gutters, the herring industry was a huge industry in Scotland and England in the 19th and 20th centuries. And women, mostly from Scotland, but also from Ireland, the Isle of Man, and England, and even some Scandinavian women, would travel around the coasts of Ireland, Scotland, and England. Usually the herring season would start in May, and then it would end in Great Yarmouth around November. And so my research is about how women would sing while working. While gutting the fish, women could gut around 60 fish a minute, so that gives you an idea of how quickly they were singing. And my master's research focused on songs in Scottish Gaelic, but for my PhD I've been expanding into Scots and English music. And so yeah, today I'm talking about kind of an infamous song. Most of you have probably heard of the Ball of Kirriemuir, and I'll just soothe anyone's nerves if they have, that we're not going to be talking about some of the raunchiest verses today, so you don't have to worry about looking too embarrassed in front of your friends if you know all the lyrics. But we're going to be talking about a particular oral history account from the School of Scottish Studies archives. In 1952, Hamish Henderson, who's a very famous and influential collector of Scottish song, he interviewed a man called George Lordy Hay, who was from Banff, and Hay was born in 1878, and he recorded for Hamish Henderson a variant of the Ball of Kirriemuir that's quite unusual in a lot of ways. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Let's see. Okay, so before I play this clip, if you're not familiar with the Ball of Kirriemuir, it is a song from the 1880s. Kirriemuir is a place in the east of Scotland, very agricultural area, and the Ball of Kirriemuir is an incredibly bawdy song about an orgy. There's no other way to put it, really. And it's a very funny song, so it's very exaggerated, and whether or not it's based on a real event is kind of besides the point. But it's it's remarkably vulgar. And so there's a lot you can find about it kind of written on the internet of people kind of laughing about it and sharing with it, and it's one of those songs that over the course of its life many verses have been added. But I found that there's actually very little scholarship about this song. It's one of those that it seems that everyone kind of in Scottish song studies kind of takes for granted that you know the story of the Ball of Kirriemuir. And I haven't actually found a lot of secondary literature about it, so at the end, if anyone has anything I haven't mentioned, I'd be really interested to hear about it. So first I'm going to play you this clip of George explaining where he heard the song to Hamish. So hopefully you'll be able to hear that.
Do you mind who was it that sang it?
Oh, toen heb ik some of that. Well, I think myself, it was some of that here in Gutter. Het used to got back, doen we moeten seaside, we moeten heel barabar. And you saw some of that ladies, they didn't care about the song. Couldn't be too rough.
No.
Well, I think there's some of them as far as I can mind, I think there's some of them that are here.
You have been playing around the seashore?
Oh, I'm just a youngster, aye. I would have been able to take that 11-year-old and that thing.
So it's really remarkable here that George gives us these details about the performance context of the song. So women gutting fish usually did so outdoors, and they often attracted spectators. whether tourists or local people. They often also relied on children because women would tie their fingers with cloth called clooties because they were salting the fish as well as gutting them. So if salt got on the wound, it would be really painful, and they had very sharp knives. So they would often rely on children to bring them extra bits of scrap fabric. So it was pretty normal to have children running around, but it's interesting how in Lordy's account, that didn't seem to preclude them from singing bawdy songs. And the other remarkable piece of information here is that he tells us he was 10 or 11 years old when he learned the song. And that dates the transmission of this song to 1888 or 1889. And the Ball at Kirriemuir is only thought to have been first composed in the 1880s, so this is a very early version of the song. And in another part of the interview, which I didn't include on the slide, Hamish actually says you have the old version of the song. And as you'll hear, if you're familiar with the Ball at Kirriemuir, it's very different. It has a different tune than what it's usually sung to, and the refrain is different. So we will listen to that in a minute, but first, just in case you're not familiar with the locations we're talking about, Banff is in the northeast of Scotland, in the Murray Firth area, very big fishing area, and Kirriemuir is quite a bit to the south in Angus, and so this shows assuming that the Ball at Kirriemuir originates in the Kirriemuir area, which we actually don't know for sure, but would make sense. You can see that already in the first decade of its existence, it was spreading pretty far. And we'll talk a little bit more about the transmission of this song later, but it's often attributed to bothy workers who would be pretty peripatetic, moving around different places, so it's not too surprising that you would get a large range already in the early life of this song. Now I'm about to play the song for you, but I wanted to point out, I didn't put all the lyrics up. My supervisor, Lori Watson, and I actually haven't finished transcribing all of them because some of them are quite difficult to make out. But I wanted to point out a few things to listen for before I play it for you. So first of all, there's this different refrain. Like I said, if you're familiar with the song, you may be more familiar with the one on the right. And so that's a difference. You'll hear that several times. And then a couple other details to point out. It has some of the common verses that you'll find in different versions of the song. So the minister's daughter, she was there, that verse, and her activities are described. That's in here. But then it has some different verses that suggest that there might have been some local improvisation going on. If you listen, there'll be a line about a quine for Peter Heed, a girl from Peterhead, which is a fishing town not far from Banff, relatively, also in the northeast of Scotland. And then they mention Mary Duncan, she was there. And this could have just been one of the gutters. It was very common in Gaelic for herring gutters to substitute each other's names into kind of comical love songs, even bawdy songs, to tease each other. So it's possible that this Mary Duncan, even though the context is lost to us now, may have been one of their fellow workers or someone they knew. So that suggests some improvisation in the song's early history. So now I will play you Lordy singing the song.
There was a ball at Kirriemuir, I've heard them say. They come all the way from Israel to hear the ranting play. Oh, I long to see the reeling time, I long to see the ball. I long to hear the fiddle play, the music in the hall. There was 20 in the peat, you can tell them on the sprouts. And you couldn't see the barn flare for haps and stunning torch. Oh, I like to see the real thing, I like to see the ball. I like to hear the fiddle play, the music in the hall. The minister's daughters, they were there and they were based of all. For the counted up the petticoats and bade them cawa. I long to see the ribbon time, I long to see the ball, I long to see the fiddle play, the music in the hall. Mary Duncan, she was there and she was best of all. For she counted our petticoats and bought them Kawa. Oh, I long to see the Valentine, I long to see the ball. I long to hear the fiddle play the music in the hall. There was a quaint for Peter Heed, singing an opera. Give me another glass, I'll write another score. Oh, I long to see the Valentine, I long to see the ball. I long to see the fiddle play the music in the hall. And now the ball is ended, and we're gone home. And our Kirriemuir is lost indeed the track again. Now I long to see the Valentine, I long to see the ball. I long to hear the fiddle play music in the hall.
So there we had George Lordy Hay singing it as he heard it from the herring gutters of Banff in the late 1880s. So like I mentioned, there hasn't been a lot of secondary literature about this song, but there is an essay about Scottish bawdry in the Merry Muses of Caledonia. The essay is by James Barke, written in 1959, and he talked about the transmission of the song. He says, generations of Bothy lads embroidered on the original until it was soon impossible to tell where the original began or ended. 2 world wars spread it among the personnel of the services, and they added and subtracted and amended, until today this thing is without beginning or end, and few there are who know anything of its origin. And it was notable to me that all of the examples he gives of people transmitting it are men, and obviously that's true, men transmitted the song, but this account from Lordy Hay is very important in that it shows that women were actually involved in the transmission of this song too at the very first decade of its existence. And in Bothies as well, there's been some research done about how the Bothy worker tends to be constructed as part of an all-male environment in the Bothies, but in reality there would have been women coming in and out a lot, whether they were like maids and servants in the household, at the big farmhouses, because the Bothy workers, these are migratory farm laborers, and so whether some of the women learned it from them in those circumstances and then spread it among herring gutters in another context, or whether it was completely independent of the Bothies, we just don't know. But I think it's important to see that obviously there is a long history of women participating in bawdy song, but this is kind of the bawdiest song in the Scots repertoire that's commonly known, and so I think while the verses that Lordy learned are not the most explicit, he's still singing about pretty openly sexual material, and so it's interesting that the women were singing this while working. And when it comes to the repertoire of herring gutters in the northeast of Scotland, most of what's been written about this is about hymns. And so the Ball of Kirriemuir is quite a strong contrast to the oral history about hymns, which was a lot of that written about by Frances Wilkins at the University of Aberdeen at the Elphinstone Institute. She did quite a bit of oral history in the kind of mid-2000s, and everyone she was talking to indicated that they were singing hymns, and so she wrote that as far as she could find, there was no pre-hymn repertoire among herring gutters in the Northeast. But this example from Lordy Hay shows that there actually was, and that this is very different from a hymn, the Ball of Kirriemuir. And it actually puts the Scots-speaking gutters in line with the Gaelic tradition of singing while gutting, which often included quite bawdy songs. And like I mentioned earlier, they would sub in the names of their friends and boyfriends and this sort of thing. And you might have noticed that the Mary Duncan verse is actually a repeat of the Minister's Daughter's verse, but they've just swapped in the name Mary Duncan. And so that, to me, further indicates that this was kind of a, maybe to them, kind of spontaneous choice to redo the verse that's now been crystallized in this oral history recording. Interestingly, Hamish Henderson references the Ball of Kirriemuir when he's working on Gaelic gutter songs. He, in the 50s, I can't remember the exact occasion, but he introduced a Gaelic gutter song, Rhéineach Asana Chiarasig, which means a star out of a showery sky. It's like an idiom for something unusual. And he introduces Rhéineach Asana Chiarasig as the Ball of Kirriemuir, the Hebrides. But Rhéineach Asana Chiarasig, when I was reading it, I'm like, this is really not that body a song, but I think Hamish Henderson was not very good at Gaelic. And there's a line in the song where she says, Hit mo lenin, ev mo hoth, which means my lover is coming after me, but he transcribed it as as mohon, which means out of my ass. So I think that's why it was such a different sort of song. So even though Rhéineach Asana Chiarasig is not as dirty as Hamish Henderson thought it was, there are still Gaelic gutting songs that kind of joke about, not as explicitly as the Ball of Kirriemuir, but like, I need to find a boyfriend, well, I'll find 16 down at the beach, that sort of thing. So kind of joking references to not really group sex, but just, kind of flirting with multiple men at least. And so, like I said, this is such a rare example of the repertoire of Scots-speaking gutters before the hymns, because there were huge evangelical revivals in the 1890s and then in 1921 in the fishing communities. And so that kind of seems to have eliminated the earlier repertoire in some places. And certainly something like the Ball of Kirriemuir would not have fit the new evangelical sensibilities, because they were thinking like, well, you have to glorify God through this work, so we're going to sing hymns. But this shows that there's a lot more to the repertoire than appeared in Frances Wilkin's works, and she was working later and interviewing people who wouldn't have remembered the 1880s. So yeah, if, like I said, this bit from James Bark is one of the only things I've been able to find about secondary literature about the song. So if anyone happens to know of other places that the Ball of Kirriemuir has been written about, I'd be really interested, so I can update that part of the historiography of my thesis. But other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments, so thank you very much.
Yes, obviously a fascinating song about some very fascinating women. Can we see if there are any questions? Oh, thank you, yeah,
not really a question, just a comment. But my late husband's father came from Stornoway, and his father, my late husband's grandfather, was a cooper, making the barrels and following the herring girls around, so that the herrings were salted in the barrels, and then he fixed the lid on top and everything. But my late father-in-law always used to say that although the herring girls in Stornoway were all Free Church of Scotland, very religious, basically they were very hard-living, hard-loving and hard-drinking girls, and in fact it was such a hard life that they would drink copious quantities of whiskey certainly he talked about the songs that they sang were often very bawdy, and not what you would expect of young women who'd been brought up as wee Frees.
Yes, that's a really great comment. Thank you for bringing that up, because it's true that the girls from Lewis were often extremely religious, and so I was interested in why is there this difference that the Scots girls, when they get religion, they're singing only hymns, and why aren't the Lewis girls doing that? And I spoke to Margaret Stewart, who's a folk singer from Lewis, and she told me that she thinks it would have been considered inappropriate to sing sacred song during work. That's kind of dirty and bloody and stuff like that. And also, they had more of a psalm singing tradition, which I think might not have lent itself as a work song, because Gaelic psalm singing is often very kind of, it's not everybody singing at a different pace and a different rhythm, if you've heard it before. So yeah, it's interesting the contrast both groups, the Scots speakers and the Gaelic speakers, were often very religious, but that could come with really different attitudes to what was appropriate to sing.
Do you have any more comments? Or yes?
I think you mentioned that it was composed in 1880. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how you know that. And also, I just wanted just a thing to say about fish. I used to work for a fish farming company in the West Highlands, and it was a salmon farming company, and they had a small factory, and the girls who got the fish sang there. Yeah.
What kinds of stuff? Then I'll answer your question.
Remember now.
Oh!
I was in the late 1980s again.
Oh, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. You know, I found in my research that in Shetland, herring gutting continued into the 70s, and they were singing like country and western and like the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. So I wonder, you know, that would be. And
I think it's whatever they do.
That's the thing. It's you know, I kind of found that they sing whatever young women are singing in their demographic. What was your question again?
I just said that you said it was composed in 1880.
Yeah, so I haven't found great evidence to back that up. It's from this James Bark. He says that, I think he says he talked to an old guy from Kirriemuir, and that's what he was told. But he didn't, I don't think he gave the guy's name. I can't quite remember. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be any record of it before then. But the general story seems to be like, oh, well, 1880 is when the ball happened. Now, whether or not that actually happened, I'm quite skeptical. But, you know, there may have been a dance. Looks like John has his hand up. I don't know if you have something you want to add to that?
Just in around the 1870s, there was a fashion for songs about balls, which were tending to be lists of what was drunk and all glorious things that were eaten. So Billy Johnson's ball was late 1870s, Clara Johnson's ball was a thing in 1870s. I don't know those normal names.
That's so interesting, John. Thank you.
So looking at, if I was looking for the origins of the song, I would look for it in the 1870s and 1880s as being what a song of type that's designed to be improvised around. So the chorus could stay the same, but you would sing whatever came into your head as a verse or whatever came into the stage performance.
That makes so much sense. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess it could be that it's just a Scottish variant of this wider phenomenon. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. My question is to you all. First, I was wondering if you could expand on the relationship between the nature of the labour and the movement of the songs, and then secondly, also the sort of spatial context to them working around together around the kind of Hyland Fishing Station rather than sort of being stood or sat in rows in a kind of traditional congregational format.
Great questions, thank you. So yeah, the question of rhythm is one that I find really interesting. It seems that, you know, so in the Gaelic tradition, walking songs, W-A-U-L-K for filling the tweed, those are kind of, the work is seen as it can't be done without the song, because the rhythm has to be consistent across the whole table as they're passing the tweed around. Gaelic gutting song isn't quite so strict. It could be done without singing. So you know, when it's not quite in the same category as walking songs and sea shanties, where the rhythm was considered completely essential. But a lot of them, you know, they were doing it for hours and hours and gutting so quickly that I think they found it helpful to get into a shared rhythm just to pass the time more quickly. And you know, when you're doing any sort of monotonous task for hours, you kind of get into a rhythm. So it was not essential, but they do talk about in oral history, like, well, we would sing this song faster than usual to make it fit the work better. And sometimes, in Yarmouth in particular, it would get really cold because they'd be out in the snow and the rain sometimes. And so they talk about like stamping their feet to keep warm. And so they'd sing to help keep that rhythm going. So it definitely played a lot of different functions, even if it wasn't essential in the way it would be with a shanty or a walking song. And in Gaelic, they would pick Porch de Beal, which is very fast music, mouth music. So it'd be like, like really fast like that. And so yeah, it was definitely a factor, but not, you could do it without it. Sometimes they would talk instead. And then as far as the spatial thing, yeah, so in this photo you can see women gathered around the farland, which is the wooden trough that the herring is dumped into. And women would work in crews of 3, 2 gutters and a packer, and so 2 women would gut and the third would pack them into the barrels, which was very hard on their backs. At one point, gutters went on strike as well to get the farmland made higher so that it wouldn't be quite as back-breaking labor. And yeah, there would have been coopers, like you mentioned, which are the men making the barrels. They were more of the gutters' equals. So they would have been often friends, brothers, sweethearts, that sort of thing. So you would have had them supervising the women's work on the yard. And then the curers were the bosses who were not considered to be from the same social strata. There was a lot of animosity. And so they would be there as well. So the women were being supervised in a way, but it was considered less supervised than like factory work, where sometimes you'd have bosses like putting restrictions on singing, like in munitions factories sometimes, or playing the BBC music, so it was only the approved music. You didn't have that in the gutting. And there would be lots of other sounds like, you know, the seagulls, people talking, laughing, shouting, that sort of thing. And it was usually, like I said, outside. So tourists would often come as well, especially in Scarborough. And sometimes you find newspaper advertisements, like for Fraserburgh, saying, come watch the beautiful Scottish girls gut and sing. Which is interesting that they were kind of, and they'd be paraded out whenever there was a royal visit too, so they were very kind of public. And there was a sense that there were often spectators, but they mostly were performing for each other and themselves rather than the spectators.
Thank you, and thank you everybody. That was really brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, and approaching the podium, here we have Megan Wisdom, who's going to be talking to us. Megan has such a lot of things, don't you, going on in your life at the moment. This is one that we're all going to enjoy. So, Megan, songs that my mother knew. I hope they were right. Anyway, thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot my pen. And I want to take notes on your talk.
I think Richard, if you would find when the sounds come up, playing the sounds for me, because I didn't manage to cue them, is that okay?
Yes, I can do that, yeah.
Thank
You should work with the clicker if you want to do it.
Okay, I'll give it a go.
Give it a go. Okay,
Hello everyone. My name is Megan Wisdom. And yeah, this is about, this talk is about women who were collected from by John Howson in Suffolk, mostly during the 1980s and 90s. Suffolk is my home county, and John is a very familiar figure to anyone who makes traditional music in East Anglia. Many of you will know who John was and will have known John, but for those of you who don't, John Howson recorded many traditional singers and musicians with particular focus on Suffolk, but also more broadly through the UK and Ireland. From the 1980s until his death in 2022, he ran the record label Veteran Records, which is now being run by Mossy over there. And yeah, particular focus on mid Suffolk. He recorded all the old songs from people in that area. His research was contained in a book, is contained in the book Many a Good Horseman, which I believe Mossy's got the last few copies of at the back there. I'll just get a little plug in nice and early. He's got the last few copies of that at the back, and the last CD of Many a Good Horseman, the album. And that includes stories, anecdotes, information about the music in the words of the people John collected from. And his recordings are now stored in the British Library. I wrote a book published a couple of years ago about the interviews in John's collection. So John's research mainly focused on the music making and aspects surrounding the music making. I re-looked at the interviews and I looked at the social history and context surrounding that music making. There is the book for anyone who's interested. Cool. My methodology in completing that study was to basically take a sample of people from John's archive. And within that sample, the proportions of men to women are roughly representative of those in the archive as a whole. What that means in practice is that there are only about 2 or 3 women included in the entire book. And this is something I've always been very conscious of since its publication. I've always wanted to rectify that. In his introduction to his book Songs Sung in Suffolk, John Howson does state his regret at not meeting more female musicians and singers. It was his belief that they were more difficult to find because they sang at home rather than in the pub. So there are far fewer women in his collection as a whole. So in order to redress that balance, I'm going to be showcasing some of the women from that collection today. You're going to hear about, I've got 4 extracts from their speech queued up. I don't know if we're going to get through them all. I've selected a kind of some of the highlights from their interviews, which give an illustration of their attitudes, their experiences, their characters. It's worth noting at this point that John often spoke to the women in his collection about somebody else, often a parent or male relative. So even if some of the women were singers or musicians in their own right, they were spoken to about one of their male relatives. And before we move on to the first person that I would like to showcase, I will give a brief summary of their topics of conversation, because they do speak with varying degrees of local accent, and even I, as a Suffolk native, find a few of the words in there difficult. So, this is Emma Briggs, outside her cottage in Thwaite in 1983. So she plays John some of her accordion, as you can see in the picture there, and she gives a rendition of Marianne, which is one of her, I think, her mother's only song. So she says, although she does say that she didn't like it because it was depressing. She remembers her mother singing it and she didn't like it. Things to note, she doesn't consider herself a singer or a musician, despite having sung and played to John over the course of the interview. And I really wanted to get this interview in because it shows her attitudes, and those attitudes are of a woman who lived in a century of enormous change. She was nearly 80 in that photograph, so she'd lived from 1903 and the change in attitudes and technology in sources of entertainment was enormous during that period. And that's particularly reflected in how attitudes towards women and women's work and women having to go out to work full time. So we'll see how this plays. Oh no, it's moved on. Do you mind doing the honours? Thank you.
Yes, take a bit of doing, look after it.
This is it. It must be a lot on your own, actually.
Oh, there's a lot on my own.
Yeah.
The place in this thing is that I'd like to keep it.
Yeah.
Oh dear, I don't have such a lot to do.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be done. There's no worry.
There isn't. I won't worry at all.
Oh, I don't worry.
No.
The good, there's some cobwebs, but as long as I can get just through my house, I think so. I'm not worried.
You used to play when you were younger.
No, I used to pinch my father.
Oh, you used to pinch your father, did you? I see. Yeah, yeah. Was he a good player?
Yes, yes.
He
used to play accordion, playing all the old songs.
He played the songs, did he?
Yes, all the old songs.
Right.
My mother used to sing. It's Marianne.
Did she?
Yeah, I think the same verse to that, ain't
Oh,
it?
at least, yeah.
My mother used to sing it, and I used to get it away because I hated it when I was young.
Did you?
I didn't like it when I was young. It was so, well, depressing, really.
How did it go? Do you remember any bit of it?
Oh, my dear Wells. Oh, mother, make my being, make him deep and hollow for my young man. As I was going across the fields, I heard the death bell tolling, and every toll it seemed to say, hard heart, keep up, Rhiannon.
Can you sing it all the words, you know?
Yeah,
You're a good singer.
I can't.
You're a good singer.
What mean, dear? I'm just not 80.
Are you really?
I'm 80 if I live a week before Christmas. My mother used to sing.
Yeah.
That's how we used to spend our evenings.
I bet you did. Yeah.
Of course we did.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Please, go on, sing us the rest of that. Go on, you sing that very well.
I can't sing it.
can.
I don't, because I don't know if I know the stuff.
I love those old songs.
Yes, so do I. I love the old songs, yes.
I bet you do.
Yes, I do.
Did you ever sing then? I mean, obviously.
No, I never did sing.
You never did
No,
sing?
I never sang in my life.
Oh, you should have done.
No, I couldn't sing only when I went to school.
That's right.
I left school when I was 14.
Yeah.
I stayed at home with my parents till I married.
Did
I didn't went to work. I don't like to see all this change. I hate it.
No, I bet you do.
I hate it.
Yeah.
Because, oh, I don't know. People have the money, but there's not the happiness today.
No, it's true, isn't it?
There's nobody happy. I think all they want is money.
It's money.
Money.
Yeah.
Money is the curse of all evil, nothing far out.
I think that's right. Yeah.
It is.
Did she sing anything else apart from Barbara Allen?
No, I never heard her sing nothing else only that.
Yeah.
Where she got it from, goodness no, I don't know. Perhaps it's when she left service, because she left service. So.
Was she?
Oh yes, well people were them days, weren't they?
That's right, yeah.
It's not right to say so, but they made good wives.
I'm sure they did, yeah.
Today, is a wife hardly a good pet partner today? They're not.
No, different thing now.
No, dear, I don't know. No, I don't know.
There's a lot more women work now as well, doesn't it? It's the thing, you know.
I've got 3 girls in Newsham now, I'll do full-time work.
Yeah.
They all do full-time, don't they?
Yeah.
All the women do what can.
Well, yes. Yeah.
Well, if they got a car and they've got rents to pay, they're stiff. In council
Oh,
houses.
yeah. They're stiff everywhere, aren't they?
Well, they are, if you have your own house, the rates it is.
The mortgage, you know, and
Yes.
nobody can buy a house outright now.
Of course they can't, they can't. It's impossible for anybody to buy a house outright.
That's right.
They can't buy a house
So you've
outright.
got to have a mortgage, and then that's, you know, that's the same as...
Well, they keep you poor, don't they? They can't pay pubs.
You don't like pubs?
No, I don't. When you drink, I never touch it.
No.
I don't like drink, and I don't like a pub.
No.
I'll tell you the real truth, I always swore I'd never marry a man who went to a pub. That's the first thing I went down. I never touched the key from the time I was about 18 or 19. I never touched the key.
And you've gone back to it now?
Well, yes, I done it because I thought myself, I sit here alone, that'll be me evenings.
Yes, that's true, isn't it? Yeah.
Television's alright, but you get bored sometimes.
Oh, yeah, it's...
Well, there's a lot to try on.
Yeah, tends to be a lot of the same old thing, doesn't it?
I ain't got coloured, I've got a black boy, I ain't got coloured.
Yeah.
Can't afford a coloured.
Yeah. Can you play something else then?
No, I'm not.
Is that all we get in?
No, I'm not playing more because I can't play.
Oh, I don't agree with that. I think
I can't play. I can only make farms. I don't call me that playing. That's only just imitation. I can't play.
I would have loved to have met her. We're going to skip over Mrs. Boo, I think. If I get time at the end, I'll play, but this is Mrs. Rumsby. Sadly, we don't know her first name, but she's the daughter of Emily Sparks, who featured on a very early tape called Two Old Singers from Rattlesden, which is mid Suffolk village. And the things to sort of note about this interview, she'd been listening to a recording of her mother singing, which she hadn't heard before, and John had brought it round for her to listen to. It's a really good source of attitudes about music making in the home, which I think is, it can have a tendency to be glossed over when you mostly speak to men, basically, because men talk a lot about singing in the pub, they talk about singing at work, they don't necessarily talk about singing in the home quite so much. And the other interesting thing to note is that she talks about her mother having the role in the village of being the person who delivered the babies, who looked after people when they were ill, laid people out when they were dead, and that's not something I've ever come across in this set of interviews at all before, and she says that she's inherited this from her mother. Yeah, and that was in, I think this one was recorded in the 1990s, so it's quite something.
There we go.
Yes, please.
Good, no.
Oh.
Cool, there we go.
I think that's it, that's it. That's why
Well, that was wonderful to hear that after all these years. It really was.
Yeah.
All I know, she was the best mother in the world.
Was she? Yeah.
We hadn't any money,
Yeah.
but she did what she could, and she always amused us, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
She would sing and tell us all sorts of stories. But well, apart from that, there was nothing momentous.
No. Why did she sing? She only sang at home then?
Only at home.
Yeah. Well,
She might have sung sometimes in after years when she joined the WI when it was formed.
that's right, yeah.
But previous to that, no, only at home.
Only at home, yeah. Well, where did she learn the songs from, do you think?
Probably from her father.
From her father?
Yes, Grandad.
He sang it?
Granddad, poor old Granddad was a good one. Granddad could sing songs, and Granddad could play the concertina and he could dance on top of the table.
Could he?
Yes. He was commonly known as our sock ball. In those days, all you had was nicknames.
That's right,
Sock ball. All the men used to belong to the club. They used to pay in at the pub.
That's right,
See?
yeah.
Then they used to have what they call a club dinners. They used to be great sing songs then. As I say, all I know about Mother, she was the best mother in the world. Mind you, she was strict.
Yeah.
We had to mind.
Yeah.
We did.
One of them, she wasn't.
Yes, but what she had, she'd give, and she was a good neighbour. And I mean, well, like myself, if people were ill, had babies, wanted to, or people died and wanted to lay out, they'd always do a mother. So I was lying out with some of her.
Did she teach you her songs? Did she actually?
I learned some of the songs, yes.
You learned them because you heard them singing?
Oh yes, I know several of those songs, and I did learn them, but I just can't sing nowadays. I had an operation on my throat.
She sings those old songs now, do they?
Of course they don't, nobody knows them.
No, too much.
And I mean, when they revive these old songs,
Yeah.
they're not the same as we used to sing them. And I mean, the songs in those days had story. They told the story. And if you missed out a verse, you missed the gist of the story.
Of course you did.
Nowadays, I mean, what are the rah-rah-rah and boom and all there is to it?
Yeah.
Oh, my mother used to play the mouth organ as well.
Did she?
Yes, she played mouth organ.
Really? Did you play the old dance tunes?
She played all the songs.
Yeah?
We used to have happy evenings together. We didn't need any money.
No? Yeah. So you don't, she'd sing most evenings, would she?
Yes. But then, of course, as the family got older, they moved away because the girls had to go into service, you see.
That's
It was the only opening left.
Yeah.
But my granny had about
I don't know whether she had 16 or 18 children.
Did she? Yeah.
Some of them died young, of course that was expected in those days.
Yeah.
And my grandmother on the other side had about the same number, but she had twins, so that counted, you see.
Yeah.
Yes.
So your father was never a singer then?
No, father didn't sing. Father's one of those quiet country blokes.
Oh,
We
I
never
see.
got into or anything, thank you.
I see.
Mother never sang nor played with the kids when father was there. It's funny, it's very quietly father's home.
Yeah.
It's funny, those ideas.
Isn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Mind you, he was a horseman. He worked long hours because he had to be at work at 5 in the morning, get his horses out. And we used to take, well, during the summertime, when Maureen told me to we used to take what they called his bait, which was 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And then in the afternoon, no, that was whenever harvesting it was horses, but we took his bait, yes, and then he didn't come home for his dinner until 3:30. That was after the horses had finished and he'd watered and groomed and stabled them and all that, you see. And then I think he went back again, so he never come home until after tea and after we were in bed by then. So, Candace said he didn't see a lot of our father.
Would you?
Probably wouldn't think so much of mother.
That's right, yeah. Because you saw us.
And if anybody is having trouble with the accent, do ask at the end, and I'll try and translate. But we'll move on now. This last recording is from two sisters, Emily Howe and Elsie Jagged. Incidentally, Emily didn't die until 2014, so she was 100 years old when she died, and she's quite a character. They speak of having an old-fashioned childhood, which is really interesting insight into attitudes of the sort of late 19th, early 20th century. And they both went into service, and I think going into service is mentioned by every woman in these interviews, and it is mentioned by none of the men. Men don't generally talk about the work of their female relatives, even though women will talk about the work of their male relatives. And a word on the yew-berries. Yew-berries are poisonous. Don't try and eat them. Thank you.
It's chops. Oh, Granny, what big eyes you've got. This is your evening of culture, this is. Our house was full of singing, as everything it was full of children and singing. And, our brothers, and we could all sing. And at Christmas, this was our entertainment. Everybody had to sing or do something. And our parents as well, which is I know some of the old songs because I remember that Banks of the Sweet Dundee. Mother used to sing that, you see, when she's bathing on Saturday nights. Because it's interesting, it was in Suffolk. Everything was sort of, in a way, 50 years behind everywhere else. Mother's attitude was sort of what we call old-fashioned. For instance, we were never expected to speak to our parents unless we were spoken to first. We woke up in the night, there was a terrific commotion in the hen run. There was obviously something about or something getting the chickens. When she came down in the morning, a stone had killed all the chickens. The parents didn't hear it because their living was the other side of the house, not near where the yard and the chicken run was, you see. Now, we wouldn't have dreamed of going along that landing to wake up and knock on the door and say, Mother, something was getting the chickens. And in thinking about that, I thought, even if there had been a fire, we were so disciplined that we wouldn't have dreamed of running along that landing and knocking on that door, would we? I wasn't allowed to read, you see. But I found that the girls I went to school with were allowed to read. But it was in our family, it was considered a waste of time. I didn't resent it. You have children that resent things. But of course you scheme so that you can read. And wasn't I glad when Woolworths started in Derry? And they opened the Woolworths. I went in there and I bought a torch for curtains so that I could read under the bedclothes. You see, you couldn't put a candle under the bedclothes.
the sister. For instance, she might be in the middle of a conversation and she said, oh, wait a minute, I must go and shit. Now, we knew shit was an unacceptable word, we wouldn't have said it in front of parents, but to her, it was the way of talking, it was inoffensive. So it was backward compared with our contemporaries.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I went in the service, I was a cook when I was 15, and one of the first things, the cook stopped there for a week to teach me the routine, and the first thing, the one thing she had to teach me was to make butter. Well, I mean, so if it wouldn't turn the butter, you see, you had to try the temperature, see if it was too so warm. There wasn't a thermometer in the house, you had to take the top of the thing and put your finger in. That butter was sold to the grocer in Clare, having had 9 fingers in it, you know. We used to go rampaging around the countryside, and we were always hungry, and you would find pheasant nests on the ground, you see, in the plantations. And of course, Ernie, our brother, who was 2 years older than I, and take a pin in his pocket, perhaps you've done this too, and pierce each end and blow the yolk on the end, and then we used to eat it. Present-day children don't know anything about that, do they? And we were so hungry we could have eaten anything. And we used to sort of eat anything. And it was funny how we instinctively knew the poison things, didn't we? And somehow no one ever seemed to tell us about which berries you didn't eat, which you didn't die. Somehow we instinctively seemed to know, didn't we? Yes. I mean, people say you is poison, that isn't, not the berries. I've eaten no end of you berries. I'm still here till the day.
There we go. I'm going to finish up there because we've, that's long enough, but I hope that's been a good introduction to a wonderful collection and to some wonderful women. I'd just like to thank Katie Howson for all of her support when I was writing the book, and Mossy for allowing me to free access to the Veteran Archive. Thank you very much.
Megan, some absolutely fascinating, amazing characters from the well, it seems like recent past to me. There we go. So, do we have probably got time for 1 or 2 comments or questions? Anybody keen? Yes, Richard.
Did you say these interviews were available to listen to?
Yeah, they are in the British Library. So. Sadly, since the British Library had their cyber attack a few years ago, they are not available on the internet. But you can go to the British Library in London or I believe Harrogate and have a listen to them. Yeah.
Is there any prospect of them ever being online again?
We keep our fingers crossed.
Great. Thank you. Yes, Tim?
Just a quick observation. Thanks very much. That was intriguing interviews. Got to listen to them for hours. But just for the theme of today, I'm just struck at how many times midwife laying out the dead cropped up.
Yep.
And it really sort of brings it home. And wise women as well. It sort of brings it all home as to the roles.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Good. Well, thank you, Megan, and thank also to Megan and Mossy for all the other things that they're doing. The Stepping Out magazine is excellent, and so thank you. So, we come to our final session, and I'd like to welcome one of my favourite speakers. Who is very familiar, not only to me, but to pretty much all of you as well. So I will hand you over to Martin, who will be talking about a fascinating character. In fact, while he's getting ready, I'll tell you, there was a phone call out of the blue when I was in the kitchen this week from a lady who said that she was a descendant of the person that married her, that Martin is going to talk about, Marianne Mason. And she wondered if he was still alive, could she talk to Martin? I forgot to tell you that. Anyway, Martin Graebe.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Some years ago it occurred to me to ask, who was the first woman who set out to collect folk songs? An interesting but not completely satisfactory answer is Sophia Plowden, an Englishwoman who from 1777 to 1790 lived in India with her husband, an officer in the East India Company. While stationed in Lucknow, she had 7 children. She later added 3 more to this total. But she found time to take an interest in the singing of the Nautch troops, the women who entertained both Indian and European gentlemen with their songs, dances, poetry and wit. These women were skilled artists, but often became courtesans. Plowden noted many of their tunes and lyrics and later had them published, and they were, for a time, all the rage in London drawing rooms. Her manuscripts were recently rediscovered in the British Museum by musicologist Professor Catherine Butler of King's College London, who's an expert on the music of Mughal India. But it could be argued that this music doesn't really meet our criteria for folk song. But another early collector, Maria Jane Williams, can certainly be described as the first woman to collect and publish folk songs in the British Isles. Her book, Ancient National Airs of Gwent and Morgana, published in 1844, was the first major collection of songs in the Welsh language, and until the 20th century, the only one. If it had not been a private publication in Welsh with a limited circulation, it would have had much more impact. But if we're talking about collecting songs in England, then the laurels should be awarded to Marianne Mason, whose book called Nursery Rhymes and Country Songs was published in 1877. I'll say a little more about the book later, but first let me tell you a bit about Marianne Mason herself. Now, it's not the first time I've talked about Miss Mason. I gave a presentation about her at the EFDSS conference in October 2013. And you can find a video of that talk on the Traditional Song Forum's YouTube channel. A more detailed account appeared in the 2014 issue of the Folk Music Journal. But I thought that in the context of this conference about women and folk song, it would be worthwhile to look at Marianne Mason again and, for this occasion, bring out some aspects of her life and work that I didn't cover fully in those earlier, somewhat academic accounts. One of the most important sources for our knowledge about Marianne Mason is her unpublished autobiographical memoir, A Pioneer Life, that is kept with other papers at the Nottinghamshire Record Office. This is a typescript manuscript that's been heavily edited at a later stage and is gathered into bundles approximating to the chapters of a book. I can't claim to have read all of it, but I do have photographs of some of the most relevant passages. Marianne Harriet Mason was born in Marylebone, London in 1845. Her mother was Marianne Atherton Mitford from the aristocratic Mitford family, which had been established in Northumberland by William the Conqueror. Her father, George Mason, came from a family that were relative newcomers, since they'd only owned land in Nottinghamshire since Tudor times. Mindful of her position in society, she says in the opening section of her memoir, "In England, everyone belonging to certain sets or classes knows or could know if they chose almost everybody else in them." When Marianne was 4, the family moved to live with her grandfather Joseph Mitford at Larne in Carmarthenshire. He'd been a captain in the Honourable East India Company and married Anne May from Herefordshire, and their daughter, Marianne Atherton Mitford, was born in India. Anne was, according to her granddaughter, a thorough musician, and it was she who taught Mason the elements of music and piano playing. Her father, on the other hand, could not carry a tune, and she tells us only recognised the national anthem because people stood up. In her memoir, we can discover a lot about Marianne's childhood. In many ways, it was idyllic, with descriptions of the children being taken out on donkeys by their nurses for seaside games and collecting shells and birds' eggs along the shore at Larne and Pendine. But other passages reveal an austere lifestyle. Their parents were, she says, very religious, and the few children's books they had were locked away every Sunday when only approved religious tracts were permitted. Their diet was mainly bread and jam, with only occasional appearances of butter or meat. And Mason put down her lack of height to her poor diet as a child. She asserts that she and her siblings were brought up with a strong sense of duty and truthfulness, though she admits to having been a violent child for which she had been justly punished. But in her teens, she was placed under the care of a governess with a sadistic temperament who outmatched her in violence and abused her badly. As if that were not enough, she would not allow Mason to practice her music except in her company, and the promise that Mason had as a pianist under her grandmother's guidance was never fulfilled for that reason. But the governess couldn't control her when she was out walking, and she would sing freely when she was out on the beach or in the woods. Her ambition was to be a professional singer, but her parents would not permit this to happen. A young woman of her class was not expected to earn her living. In later years, she was allowed singing lessons from leading teachers and performed regularly in private functions. Her father taught her Latin, Greek, German, Euclid and algebra. She was later advised by a friend to conceal her knowledge or she would never get a husband. She never did, choosing, like many intelligent and well-off women of her generation, not to give up control of her life. The family left Larne in 1867 and George Mason decided that he'd build a new home at Retford in Nottinghamshire, where he'd become increasingly involved in local business and politics. This was Morton Hall, and as you can see, it's a substantial house. While the work was in progress, they moved to Switzerland, where Marianne Mason took an interest in alpine plants. When they moved into their new home, she was allowed to construct a rock garden, which I have seen, and which was an ambitious piece of work with some very large stones, several hundred tons of them. The house was occupied by American servicemen during the Second World War and didn't survive the experience. Alpine gardens, though, became fashionable, and Marianne was consulted by many other landowners who wanted their own rock garden. This is a picture of it as it is today, beside one of it at the time. It's been somewhat simplified since then. In her early 30s, she damaged her voice by singing when she had an infection. She says, "It was, and still is, like losing half of oneself. To feel the song inside one and to fail in bringing it out is like trying to run with a broken leg." To help her overcome her grief at this loss, the family suggested that she should compile a book of the family songs. In her memoir, Mason says of the title, Nursery Rhymes and Country Songs, I called it this because folk songs seemed to me to be too German. We learn from the preface of the first edition that many of the songs have never been published before, and it is to rescue them from oblivion that this book is now printed. Though some well-known favourites have also been inserted, they have not been taken from any other collection, but have been learned like the rest from persons to whom they have been handed down by oral tradition. The music has been very simply arranged, and the words being given as far as possible as they were sung. This in 1877, the words seem so often repeated by later folk song collectors. Of the 58 songs in the book, most are nursery rhymes, 33 of them having been marked as originating with the Mitfords. The book is dedicated to her grandmother, Mrs. Mitford, from whom most of these songs were learned. In the preface to the new edition published in 1908, she said, most of the songs are Northumbrian, traditional in my mother's family, the Mitfords of Mitford, Northumberland. I've now added the word Mitford in each case to show which of the songs I learned in this way, but not to claim that they are all distinctly Northumbrian. I've also added some further notes as to the source of the others. The attribution does not quite ring true, since her grandmother was a Mitford only by marriage and came from Herefordshire. In her memoir, Mason says that her songs were learned orally from my mother and grandmother Mitford. Mason's mother had been born in India in 1809, and Joseph Mitford didn't leave the East India Company until 1826, so she would not have had much exposure to the Mitford family repertoire in its native country as a young child. It seems therefore that Mason is right not to claim that the songs are distinctly Northumbrian. Excuse me. Two of the songs, Have You Seen My Love and The Cutty Wren, were heard as a child from Mason's nurses when they lived in Carmarthenshire. And there are several adult songs heard by Mason in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. The book concludes with 6 songs taken from the collection made by John Broadwood earlier in the 19th century. And this was a result of Marianne Mason's acquaintance with his niece Bertha Broadwood. The two women had met in 1872 through their mutual interests in social issues. In her memoir, Miss Mason writes, Miss Bertha Broadwood also gave a very interesting collection made and printed for private circulation by one of her uncles in Surrey and Sussex, and I added the best of them at the end of my book. And the 6 songs are included, it says, by permission of Bertha's father, Henry Fowler Broadwood, then head of the family. Mason also met Bertha Broadwood's younger sister, Lucy. Lucy Broadwood's interest in folk song grew, and she was, within a few years, to become a leading figure in the late Victorian folk song revival. She too became a friend of Marianne Mason, and they met on numerous occasions over the following years. In May 1889, for example, Mason stayed for 5 days at Lyme, the Broadwood family home on the Surrey-Sussex border. And Lucy Broadwood's diary records that the two women spent time walking and driving out in the area. Then, in the following September, Broadwood made a reciprocal visit to Retford to stay at Morton Hall with the Mason family for 6 days. On her return to London, Broadwood noted in her diary that she'd spent some time on arrangements for several songs, including The Spider and The Derby Ram. These were among 5 songs from Mason's collection that made their way into Broadwood's English county songs in 1893. 4 came from Mason's book, but not The Derby Ram, This suggests that while Broadwood was staying with her, she was given access to some songs that Mason had not published. In the preface to the second edition of Mason's book, published in 1908, she writes, "My own collection had been for some time out of print. I've delayed republishing it because I wished to add to it and to insert some further footnotes. Since 1885, I've been inspector of the boarding out of poor law children under the local government board, and my official duties, including a very heavy amount of writing, have left me no time for any private work." So the 1908 edition contained no new songs, though the songs derived from the Mitford family have now been identified as such, and several of the notes have been enlarged. If there were more manuscript songs among her papers, they have not yet been discovered. Nursery rhymes and country songs is now hard to find, but you can see a copy in the resources collection on the TSF website, tradsong.org. From an early age, Mason had accompanied her mother when she went to visit the poorer people of the district, first in Larne and later around Retford, carrying food and comforts for those that needed them. And this, she said, gave her a good understanding of less well-off people, which was of great value in her later social work. She developed a particular interest in the welfare of children who had been boarded out by the local councils into foster homes, and became the voluntary supervisor of all the poor law boarding out committees in Nottinghamshire. She gained a reputation for this work, and in 1885, at the age of 40, she was appointed as the Inspector of Boarded Out Children for the Board of Trade, covering England and Wales. And this role made her the first woman to become a senior civil servant. Over the next 25 years, she travelled hundreds of miles around the country to visit children under all sorts of conditions and in all weathers. She would typically see more than 300 children every year. Although it was not part of the job, she often maintained contact with them as adults and helped them to find work. Apart from her annual reports, she wrote articles and pamphlets about the care of children, and she retired in 1910 at the normal retirement age. Her work reduced the opportunities for socialising, but we know from Broadwood's diaries that the two women kept up their correspondence. After she retired, Mason took an apartment at Vincent Square Mansions in London, a short walk from Broadwood's home on Carlisle Place, and were now regular visits for lunch with each other when Mason was not on one of her long visits to stay with her brother in South Africa. She came home for the duration of the First World War, and in 1914 provided introductions to the War Office for Broadwood, who developed an interest in camp cooking for soldiers. The following year, Mason and Broadwood were involved in arranging an at-home event at the Grafton Gallery in London to raise money for a fund to support Belgian musicians and soldiers who'd taken refuge in London. Mason was one of the principal organisers, and Broadwood acted as secretary for the organising committee. There was a programme of musical items, and Mason made a speech in support of the fund. Broadwood's diary records that their meetings prior to the event. On the day, though, she felt unwell and didn't go herself, but sent her two maids to help with tea. In the evening, Mason came round to Broadwood's flat carrying the bag of donations gathered during the event, which amounted to £165. Retirement had allowed Mason to spend time in South Africa, where her brother, George Edward Mason, was the principal of a college for native clergymen. Here she studied and painted the flowers that she found, and she discovered new species that were named after her, most famously Crocosmia masoniorum, a variety of Montbretia that is now found in many gardens. She wrote several articles for the Journal of the Royal Horticultural Society and was made a Fellow of the Royal Geographic Society. She gave her paintings of flowers to the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, where they were exhibited for many years and where they're now kept in the archive. She moved permanently to South Africa soon after the First World War ended and built a house in Cape Town that she named Morton. She died there in April 1932 and was buried as she had requested, with a bottle of chloroform in her hand, in case she wasn't actually dead. Marianne Mason described herself as a pioneer, and I think she lived up to that claim in several ways. What concerns us most here is her contribution to folk song, and she certainly deserves to be recognised as the first woman to have collected folk song in England, and I sometimes go further and say she was the first to publish a folk song collection in the modern format. Her interest in the songs was genuine, and it is, I believe, likely that she would have followed through on her stated wish to add to her published collection if she had not had such a demanding job and if she had not had so many other interests. She never became involved in the Folk Song Society or its successor, but she knew Sabine Baring-Gould and says in her memoir, "I kept up the friendship with Mr. Baring-Gould until official work and afterwards the war left me with too little time for much else. And in 1892, I spent some delightful days with him and his family at New Trenchard, when official work brought me near." Mr. Baring-Gould's singing of his Songs of the West, especially of the Three Drunken Maidens, was worth hearing. What might Marianne Mason have achieved if she'd pursued her work on folk song? But what a loss that would have been to the thousands of children whose lives she helped to improve. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Martin. And thank you all for listening, and I'm sure there'll be maybe one or two who have a comment or a question might like to put.
No, it's the last paper of the day.
Yes, we do have a turn.
Thank you, Martin. He was totally new to me, so it's very educational. Sounds a wonderful woman. Are there any particular songs which she published first that you would pick out as being gems which were, you might say, discovered by her?
She was the first to publish the Cutty Wren, other than its appearances on early broadsides in a slightly different format, or form rather. And it is quite possible that that is the version that Bert Lloyd picked up, although he said he got it from, he saw the version from Janet Blunt as well. There's a very strong resemblance to that Marianne Mason collected. And it may even be that Janet Blunt's version had originated with Mason's collecting, because you've got sort of something like 40 years between her publication and the song appearing in Blunt's collection, for example. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the ones that sticks in my mind. And another one is the other one that Lucy Broadwood mentioned, The Spider, which was quite an interesting one. But a lot of the rest, as I said, a lot of it is nursery rhymes, which are variants of customary patterns, and one or two other nice songs. And of course, the John Broadwood songs, this was the first time that the public as a whole had a chance to see them, because it was a very limited edition when published in the 1840s. Does that help? Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. That was really interesting. I noticed Mitty Mason was mentioned there, and I'm just wondering, was that a nickname for Marianne, and is it from Mitford or?
That was her nickname. Mitty was the family nickname for her. That I got from one of her descendants as confirmation. That was what Broadwood always called her.
And does it come from Mitford? It's not really a short for Marianne, is it? I mean,
Yes, it's from Mitford, I think.
Mitford, yes.
So family nicknames are often a mystery.
Yes. Anyway, thank you. That was very interesting.
Well, in that case, it remains to say thank you to Martin and thank you to everybody here. I know Steve is going to wind us up before
Another round of applause. We've kept incredibly well to time today. I think it's because we had all four of our chair people were women. Normally, right now I'm saying, get out the door, we've run out of time. Anyway, we did have time for if anybody wants to say anything about the whole day or any questions that they couldn't ask earlier on. We do have 5 minutes, 10 minutes even, as long as you get out fairly quickly after that. Anybody want to say anything?
I'd like to say thank you to all those who've been involved in the organisation.
Yes.
I was going to do that in a minute. Anybody else? No? No. Well, it remains to say thank you for coming. It's been a nice audience, very nice, good audience, good day, lovely speakers, good organisation. Thank you to the Portico.
Yep.
So our next conference will be in Leeds in
10th of October.
10th of October, which will concentrate on Folksong in the North. I suppose we are in the North, aren't we? Here. If you live in Cambridgeshire, pretty much everything's in the North. Anyway, because it's celebrating the life of Frank Kitson, came from Leeds, of course. So it'll be concentrating on northern song stuff. And our next Zoom meeting is soon.
Give me a minute.
Probably the 18th of May.
Is it 18th?
18th of May. So do join us.
17th of May.
17th of May. Don't join us on the 18th. Join us on the 17th. If you don't know about our Zoom meetings, more or less once a month. On a Sunday we get together for 2 or 3 papers on all sorts of topics to do with song, traditional song. So again, thank you very much for coming.
You mentioned the traditional song forum and the Irish one.
Oh, right. Yes, we do have a chat list, as we used to call it, a discussion list called TradSong, tradsong.io, again on all these sorts of topics. So please do join that if you haven't done before, because that's the place to ask questions and tell people what we're doing and stuff. But we also have one that specialises in Irish traditional song, called Irish Traditional Song Forum, I think, something like that. Again, that's a .io discussion. That's relatively new, so we need more people to join in that. And again, it's all of these things are about communication. The books are, the papers, conferences, the Zoom meetings are all about communicating with each other.
Great places to look for things.
Yes, very good place for looking for information.